Hi, everybody. I just wanted to first start out by saying I'm really impressed with everything that you've been posting. It's going great. I'm really, really thrilled that most of you are just working like crazy getting these chapters done. So thank you, and I've enjoyed reading your posts to both the discussion boards and the pre-writes. I just wanted to explain really quickly the reason why I don't have you read anything before you do the pre-write, and that is I'd like you to be able to examine the way you look at a situation before you learn about the sociological part of it and how a sociologist would think. And the idea here is that you'll be able to go back and see how your perspective is shifting throughout the course. So as you've been doing, please just give me your personal opinions and your stories and examples in those pre-writes, and then shift it to a more sociological conversation in the discussion boards. I'm going to apologize right now. I'm sick. Something's going on, and I may start coughing, and I'm going to try really hard to keep that to a minimum for this. But if I cough, I want to apologize for that now. So, Chapter 4, Socialization and Social Interaction. This is one of the foundations of symbolic interactionism and the theory of symbolic interactionism because it deals a lot with micro-level social interactions and the micro-level social groups. So socialization begins when we're born, and it continues until the day that we pass on to whatever we pass on to. We get there's a box that we get checked off on, a couple of boxes actually, when we're born. One is race, one is sex, biological sex, and those things tend to define us throughout the course of our lives. And we learn how to operate in society sometimes based on those check boxes. So this process of socialization really is a construction of our individual as self, our individual identities. And there's a whole field in sociology that talks about identity formation and the social conditions surrounding it. Excuse me. This is also a primary way of reproducing culture because we learn what is normal behavior, what is normal beliefs, what is expected of us as members of society, and we try to stick to that the best we can. When we deviate from that, of course, it becomes deviance, and we make decisions based on how that deviance is perceived by others. So there's a question that we ask, which is nature versus nurture. Nature is biology. As far as I'm concerned, it's the bad B word in sociology because nature, by its very definition, says that something is biological, it's genetic, you inherited it, therefore it is a part of your being whether you like it or not. Nurture, on the other hand, is a cultural and social experience where the interactions that you have with individuals and social institutions define who you are or help you define who you are. And the million-dollar question is, we know that these interactions exist, but which one is more influential? Is it the nature piece of it or the nurture? We know that the capacity for behavior can be biological in that we have individuals that maybe have learning disabilities, or as in the case of my nephew, he's nonverbally autistic. So, biologically, he is limited in his capacity for certain behaviors. But we know that behavior is not really natural. It's learned. We learn behaviors after a certain point. And that starts out from when we're coming home from the hospital, or when we're in the hospital in the nursery, we get hungry, we cry, and we figure out really quickly that if we cry loud enough and we cry hard enough, somebody gonna feed us. So we cry, and some of us do it as an adult. When we want something from someone in our lives, the tears may come out. So, in that sense, behavior is learned, and it's learned through interaction with others. Now, there's a really great video I want to show you now, and I think it reframes this question of nature versus nurture in a very, very different way. You get to see my desktop here. Isn't that cool? Okay. So that is Wanda Sykes, for those of you that aren't familiar with her. And she just recently, well, not recently now, it's been a few years, but she came out, and it was kind of a shocker to her fans, some of them. But what I really liked about this video is that as a lesbian of color, she turns this notion that being gay is nurture, and that race is nurturing. It is nurture, that we learn race. And she's onto something. Race is actually socially constructed, and we're going to talk about that more next. I think it's the next chapter. But the way she frames this, if you notice, she talks about Soul Train, and she talks about hanging out with black people. Well, that is indicative of nurture. That is the argument that individuals use when they say that you're not born that way. And a lot of that is based on social learning. That is, that people adapt their behavior in response to social rewards and punishment. It's one of the ways that we look at behaviorism, and that's a psychological perspective. And I know we have some psych people in the course, and I would love for you to post some stuff up there on the discussion board about this. That behaviorism basically emphasizes the effect of rewards and punishments on human behaviors. So it pretty much says, in a nutshell, that human and animal behavior can be learned and are not just instinctive. And I'm going to use two words to describe what that sentence is saying: potty training. Anybody that has gone through that process with a young person, a baby or a toddler, knows that it doesn't just happen. You have to figure out a system of rewards and punishments to get that little girl or guy to make sure they use that potty, and when they do, life is good. Well, think about it. If you have a dog, didn't you do the same thing? Didn't you have to house train your dog, maybe your cat, to make sure that they knew when they had to do their business, they went outside and they didn't do it on your living room rug? So once again, that is a system of rewards and punishment. And we're doing the exact same thing, but we like to think that it isn't. Sorry about that, because of this differentiation between human and animal behavior. Um, Social learning goes a step further, and it just says that, you know what, we're going to adapt to the way that we do things based on the social rewards and punishments. So let's go back to this question of gayness for a second. Um, in the Bay Area, most people don't realize it. We live in a microcosm where things are pretty much uh, acceptable. There's very few things that aren't socially acceptable overall in the Bay Area. But if you're coming out in the Midwest in a small town, you're gay, or someplace else in the country where they're not quite as liberal, you're going to find that probably there's not going to be a large contingency of out gay, lesbian, transsexual, and bisexual individuals. That those individuals are going to tend to hide their behavior or live a straight life because the rewards and punishments from the social groups that they live in, the communities or the societies they live in, are far too great for them to act or behave in an out manner. Symbolic interactionism really speaks to the heart of what we're talking about here. It views every interaction as being based on a negotiation and an interpretation of language and symbols. So there's this cat, and his name was Cooley, and he talked about this looking glass self. And a looking glass is simply a mirror, right? So he says that, what we do is we use society as a mirror, and we try to figure out what others think of us, and then we will go back, interpret that, and switch up our behaviors, our dress, our attitudes, whatever it is, to better fit how those individuals look at us. And we talk about primary groups, secondary groups, and reference groups. These three groups are really important. Our primary groups are those that we have intimate relationships with: family, friends, significant others, perhaps professors or coworkers that you're extremely close to. Secondary groups are, other students, people that you work with that you just see at work. You may go out once in a while, but they're in no way intimate. And then reference groups. Now, the reference groups are the standards for behaviors. Now, I worked in retail for a number of years, and when I started out at Barnes and Noble, I was just a bookseller. I was ringing up sales, I was helping customers. It was all good. But then I wanted to buy a nice car. So I decided, well, if I could get into a management position, I could make more money and become full-time, get benefits, all that good stuff. So what I did was I started to dress a little bit better. I started to talk a little bit better. I started to be show more initiative. And I started to mimic the behaviors that I saw my supervisors enacting, the role that they enacted as a manager or someone in management. And I think if we look back, um, we can see this time and time again, right? If you look at, politicians, or, if you want to be a doctor, there may be a group or a model, a role model that you don't know that you want to aspire to be like that person. And reference groups gives us the standards for those behaviors. And we can have them in our workplace, we can have them in school. And I would argue too that you can have ideal family types through reference groups. And of course those would be the um, the images and the interactions that we see through mass media. George Herbert Mead, I really like this guy. He is really cool. He talks about the I and the me. And the I, that's the unpredictable part of us. Hey, Susan, you want to go jump off a bridge? Yeah, sure, let's do it. Woohoo! Okay, that is the impulse to act. Now, the me, according to Mead, is the way we see ourselves as others see us. So it's, hey, let's go jump off a bridge, Susan. Well, they're trying to get me to do that because, you know, they want to see if I would do what they want me to do, and they're going to make fun of me. And so, you know what? Nobody else in this group would jump off a bridge, so I think I'm not going to do it. That's a really kind of convoluted explanation for what Mead was saying. But in essence, the me says, what are people going to think if you do this? And the way we do that is we do this, we take on those roles. It's called role taking, according to Mead. And that is something that we learn to do. So some people, it's very similar to empathy in that we try to understand what the other person's role in the interaction is. So there's 4 stages of socialization. There's the preparatory, that's from birth to 3 years. Those little cats are self-centered, limited responses, no, no, no. Anybody, it sounds like little Amy Winehouse is running around the house. That is the sense of, you know, I'm gonna just do what I need to do. And language starts from the crying and the screaming or the cooing. And it's all about the baby, right? Comfort me, feed me, make me feel good about myself. The second stage is the play stage, and that occurs, roughly around 3 to 4 years of age. That's when they start taking on those attitudes and roles of their significant others. I know when my nephew was in this stage, he would love to get on my laptop and he would just play on the laptop. I was writing my thesis at the time, and he saw that behavior, and that's what he wanted to do. He loved watching me run statistics on a statistical program that produced graphs. He thought that was the coolest thing. And he also decided that, I'm thinking that, when mommy is angry, mommy takes it out on Aunt Susan, so I'm going to take it out on Aunt Susan. Nah, not really. He didn't say that. But my sister calls me Suze, and she would address me as Hey Suze. Anytime she needed help, she'd say, Hey Suze, why don't you help us out with this? Can you help me with that? Well, when Jason wants something to this day, he says, Hey Suze, Hey Zeus, and because he's nonverbal, it comes out Jesus. So he is taking on an attitude and a role of a significant other, meaning his mother. This is also the time where little boys and girls like to tell parents what to do, or they want to start helping, mommy and daddy or grandma and grandpa, whoever it is, with different things around the house. The game stage is where children take on the roles of multiple others. and they're aware that there's a hierarchy in society and that there are different perspectives. So if you ever watch these kids play, it's kind of cool because one of the most common things they do is play house, or they may play, I don't know, fireman or whatever it is. But oftentimes it's house. And one gets to be the mommy, one gets to be the daddy, if that's the family structure these children grow up in. And other children may become the little kids, right? So there's some power relationships going on, but more importantly, children learn how to take on multiple selves. So they can act like a teacher, they can act like a mommy, they can act like a doctor, they can act like a firefighter, and they're very much aware of what those roles entail, very superficially. Finally, when they reach an adult stage, right, when they are um, becoming more and more adapt at seeing social cues and things like that, they take on this generalized other. And that means that if I do X, then it will either align with or deviate from a norm and value. And other people are going to see me as either normal or deviant. And that drives behaviors and attitudes. Jean Piaget believed that humans were socialized in stages much like Mead, but talked about cognitive development and that logical decisions are the capacity for them continue to increase as a person gets older. And once again, as you can read, infants are highly egocentric and self-centered, and there's a sense of moral development. We learn how to think abstractly about different concepts and how our actions are going to affect others. I am going to go ahead and let you read Kohlberg's Three Stages of Moral Development in the book because I just want to move this along a little bit. I don't want you to be here all night. Freud, everybody knows Freud, so we're going to skip over him. The id, the ego, and the superego, I think it is. I want to talk about agents of socialization. And the first and foremost primary socialization group is the family. And a lot of you wrote about your families in more than one pre-write because they are the primary socializing group. They are the ones that will transmit the cultural values, the norms, the behaviors, the language, everything that is culture starts, the foundation starts with our family. And when I say family, I'm not talking about necessarily the traditional family. It's those that we identify as being close to us. We learn the stereotypical gender roles and behaviors, and that is more likely to happen in heterosexual families than it is gay and lesbian families. And we know that childhood experience is linked to homicide, suicide, aggression, drug use, college graduation, unwanted pregnancy, all of those things that we would consider to be deviant in grown-up world is really linked to childhood experiences and how children are socialized. As I said, the family typically varies, and it really varies on the premise of ethnicity, class, and marital status. So I'll let you look over that real quick. Another strong agent of socialization, I'd say probably second only to the family, is school. And schools have an amazing ability to socialize our children in ways we don't even realize. And this is one of my real areas of interest in research because of this hidden curriculum. It's all that unspoken classroom stuff that you learned as a kid and you do to this day in meetings and at religious gatherings, at family gatherings, perhaps. It's all the stuff we don't talk about, but we learn. So, for instance, if you went through K through 12 here in the United States, you probably learned the Pledge of Allegiance and the national anthem. Well, part of the hidden curriculum of schools is to produce citizens. There's this guy, John Dewey, he back in the 1920s, and he talked about education being the conduit to a strong democracy. And that's one of the foundations our education system, modern education system, is based on. And that by using schools to socialize children, we're going to get a much better society. But there's other things too. I mean, there's the competitiveness. You know, we are our GPA. Think about that for a second. How do you define yourself as a student? Probably not that, oh, I've taken this class and I'm really interested in this theory, but I am an A student, I am an F student, I am an average student. We get the message very early on that GPA defines us in the realm of education, and that's actually kind of a really bad way to think about identity, or a negative way to think about identity. We also learn respect for authority, in the sense that, you know, we raise our hand when we want to be recognized. We are sharing, especially in pre-K, kindergarten. We learn how to share, how to work as a team. And we also learn our gender roles and our class status, how we are to act. And when we get to class and gender, you're going to find that the messages that little girls get and little boys get are very different. And the messages that someone that is going through a public urban school, say in East Oakland, the messages they get about their socioeconomic class and the way it impacts the sense of self is very different than a student going to a more affluent school in suburbia, or and even in the rural areas. We'll see how this idea of class plays out. Our peers, you know, everybody has friends, hopefully. And they're the people that are the same age. They have the same social standing. And at a point, there comes a point in time in every child's life that they start to move away from the primary agents of socialization, the parents and the siblings, and into, you know, people of the same age group. So this tends to happen like usually middle school, high school, and more time is spent outside of the house. And it's where conformity to values and norms starts to really play a big role in people's lives, in young people's lives. You know, we can talk about how gangs are more influential than families and demand a high conformity level. But we can also talk about how this conformity can be positive in the same way, in that maybe the peer group is also affiliated with a religious, has a religious component to it or spiritual component. And in that sense, this there's a pressure to conform to values and norms that are seen as non-deviant, or valued above. Every young group, every generation, we all know this, has a very unique way of doing things, right? The vocabulary has changed, the normative behaviors change, everything changes, you know. I'm finally to the point in my life where I go, man, that's not the way it was when we were coming up. We would have never done that. And I've realized at that point I'm old and I'm not happy about it. But when I look at it from the term of socialization, I'm at a different point in my process, obviously, than someone in high school. But for those of you that are far out from the experience of high school, and I mean 10 or more years, or you have children of your own, do you notice that there are, when they become more socialized with their peers, they start spending more time with them, that there are things that they say that you don't know. You don't understand what they're saying. One of my favorite commercials is the cat who's standing there, um, doing the or filling his swimming pool, above ground swimming pool with a hose, and he talks about his daughter saying he's out of touch, and lol. I love that commercial because it really shows that there's a very different understanding of the vernacular used through different generations. Finally, peers bring us to this point of anticipatory socialization. And that is, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about before about wanting to get the management job with the reference group. But anticipatory socialization is trying to be the cool kid. You look around you, you figure out who is in a position that you want to be, and then you start to emulate that behavior. You start copying it. You start talking like they do. You start dressing like they do. And eventually, hopefully you get accepted into the group because you have adopted those beliefs and standards. The media, everybody complains about how the role the media plays in the socialization of our youth. Um, and, you know, Probably more so than TV and music videos, is the internet because everyone is connected. Almost everyone is connected. It is amazing the things that you can find online, um, and I'm blown away. It's one of those areas that I'd really like to study more about and possibly do some writing about because the internet is a world unto itself, and there's social rules and norms and behaviors on the internet that you would never get away without here. And in one of your assignments, I decided 10-point assignment for the research project is going to have you going online and doing a bit of analysis. I play this game online, Forge of Empires. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but I have a group of friends on there. There's about 20 or 30 of us, and we are tight, man. You don't attack one of us without anybody else going, and they feel like real friends. I've never met any of these people. Probably don't want to. But I consider them to be my community. We're friends, and they don't care what I look like. They don't care what I sound like because they don't know that. I get to be me on that website. Um, yeah, it's an interesting phenomena, but there's a negative side to it, of course. And there is depression, poor socialization, cyberbullying is rampant, and it's not just with kids. Um, I'm hoping that you'll see what I'm talking about when you do the project. Um, Total institutions are just that. They're the places that people become isolated from the rest of society, of the larger piece of society, and it's usually meant or people are totally institutionalized when behaviors, norms, beliefs want them to change. Somebody wants to change individuals. So some examples are the prison, the military, hospitals, rehab centers, where people can't just leave on their own. And these are seen to be important um, because they control different aspects of social life for the rest of us. Each of these institutions listed here has a process of resocialization, And that is when the identity part of who we are is broken down and rebuilt. So I'm ex-military, so I'll speak to that. You go into basic training. What happens? They take away everything you own. You put on a uniform, and you're called by your last name, and you are nothing but part of your group. You are part of your platoon. You are part of your section, whatever it is. You are not one person. You are uh, your group is one person. You go through this training. You go through basic training, and eventually you're isolated from friends, family. Go out in the field for a couple weeks at a time. You come back, but in this process, you're learning that the people that you're going through with, those are your buddies. Those are the people you would die for. You start treating them like family. And the reason you do this is because when you're in a situation, a military situation, when lives are at stake, you want to know that that guy's got your back, right? So it rebuilds after the breakdown of the self occurs. There's a rebuilding of a personality or sense of self that is desired. Now in prison, they want you to make sure you're doing everything, right? They want you to be the model prisoner. Don't do a crime, just do your time and you'll get out on time, right? Hospitals, same thing, rehab centers. But what comes out of this then is a better, and I'm using quotation marks right now, person that can operate and function in society in a positive way. Some people say it's very effective. Some people say it's not. But your book goes more into depth on that. So, social interactions are the rules that govern how we deal with each other. They are the languages we use, the body or the gestures, the body language. But we all have to agree on what a meaning means, what a symbol means. So if I stick up my middle finger or stick up my thumb and give you the thumbs up symbol, well, that may mean all is good, everything's good, life is good, yay. But in other cultures, that could be like sticking my middle finger up at you, you know. So we all have to understand um, the context in which we're using body language and gestures. Um, and a lot of these conventions differ across different societies. Oh, this is my guy, my man, Irving Goffman, Presentation of Self. This this cat is amazing. He is the go-to guy for identity for me. And I love the way he breaks it down. There's this dramaturg, I can never say that word, study of social interaction as a theatrical performance. So what Goffman said is he looked at social interactions and he said, you know what? I'm going with Shakespeare. Life is a play, right? And for each play, there has to be a cast of actors. And if I look at myself as one of those actors, I have offstage behavior and I have onstage behavior, but I'm always an actor. And when I'm on stage, I'm presenting myself, or as he termed it, the presentation of self. Um, and it is the creation and management of the personal impressions you leave with individuals. So you're playing a role. So as professor, I'm trying to be very academic. I'm trying to engage you. And even though we're online, I'm telling you what to do and you're conforming to that because of my social position. I want to make sure that my voice is clear. I want to make sure that you think I know what I'm talking about. And so I can use videos, I can use the PowerPoint presentations, all of this extra stuff to give to you, um, so that I appear to be knowledgeable, more knowledgeable than you in this context, so I can control it. Um, and is lots of stuff outside of that, because when I step off stage, I am going to try to make sure that I did everything I wanted to do, but I'm still saying, how did they perceive me? Was my part of the play enacted correctly? Um, and he is just this really, really cool guy. Um, he talks to about team impression management, which is where you are, you know, everybody's role, you know what everybody is supposed to do, and that's how you act. Another good example, my sister just recently got married. And, you know, I'm going to be honest with you, I come from a working class background, and we like to celebrate many of life's events. And so we were at the wedding, at the reception, and it was very informal, so it was really nice. But we were all on our best behavior. We were doing this team impression management, my brother and my sister and I, so that my sister's new family would see us in a positive light and make her life easier, hopefully. Um, so that's an example of team impression management. Um, there's also these different types of realizations that we come to. But more importantly, I want to go back to this backstage thing really quick. Like I said, that's when we are practicing. For instance, when I lecture at East Bay, and I used to ride into work on my bike, my motorcycle, I would practice. And what I mean by practice is before I got to class, I would go through the lecture. I'd actually talk to myself on the bike or in the car, and I would practice what I was going to say. Um, as you could tell from the first lecture on to now, I don't like reading stuff, right? I did that. That was so fake. I hated it. So I just decided to be very real with you all. Um, but that really was a process by where I needed to, step away from it and practice what I wanted to convey to you. It was an impression management technique I used. Um, so here they're talking about ethnomethodology, um, and that's, yeah, I'm not really sure why they put this in here. Um, oh, I know why, because this is the studies. This is the way we look at it from a sociological perspective. And we look at, when we do something through an ethno method, we are studying what is just taken for granted, the knowledge and the things people do um, to manage social situations and interactions. And people actually will watch in my other classes when we have more time. I have students go out and ride BART for at least a good hour and a half, and they have to make notes of all of the things that they see. One example would be when an elderly or disabled person gets onto a BART car. Are they, do people get up out of those front seats, or do they stay in place? Um, that is a way of studying something from an ethnomethodology standpoint. Conversation analysis really comes through the field of communication, and that's when we would sit down and we would watch people talk, right? And we want to see how that the symbol and the meanings change, and how they know the rules of conversation. We have rules of conversation in the English language just as any other language has. And it really is defined by um, where the individuals are situated as in terms of the power that they hold. So if two friends are talking, those two friends' conversation is going to look very different than if the same two people are having a conversation and it's about work and one of them happens to be the other's manager. So how do those things differ? How are they the same? And how do we know how to differentiate between the two? That's it for chapter 4. I'm going to try to get you up another one here soon. I'm starting to lose my voice though. Stay tuned, you guys. You're doing a great job. I'm really proud of you, and we'll talk soon. Thanks. Have a good night.